Smart aesthetics, branding, marketing, entrepreneurship.
Greetings and welcome back to now part 3 of the Building a Bragworthy Brand Empire presentation. We are on to the third section, which is going to be crafting your unique aesthetic and tone. This is very overlooked, I find, in branding. It's a lot of times that people come to the point of getting the branding done and then they fall off. And really what we need to think about is actually how you're going to take all of the hard work that we did in the branding of stocking your kitchen with ingredients and build out that full experience of your brand. So your first homework is, if you haven't listened to part 2 or part 1, go back and do that first, because that'll be useful to you. And also, if you are more of a visual learner, please join us over on YouTube, because we'll be sharing some of the visuals from the slides in this video. Without further ado, crafting your unique aesthetic and tone for me really comes down to aesthetics, sound, and message. So there's sight, there's sound, and there's message. Maybe as technology evolves and we can also get into feel and taste, that could work too. But for the purpose of really building that brand universe, building a multi-sensory brand, if you will, it's about creating the visuals, the sound, and the message that best fits your brand. Visuals. Let's cover that one first. Just like the earlier slides in this presentation and earlier talking points from the first 2 parts of this, it's laid out really on a spectrum. So the visual style of your brand does a lot to communicate your values. So everything from light and airy to natural and balanced to warm and inviting to vibrant and bold to dark and moody. There are a lot of different ways that you can communicate your brand when you build beyond just the branding, right? So this will come across visually, most obviously, in photography and videography. So when you're considering how to present your brand and present your brand to your customer, to your clients, for example, narrow in on where on this spectrum you want to live with your branding. Is it super light and airy and breezy? Is it super dark and moody and dramatic? Is it really natural and balanced and kind of carefree? Or is it really bold and vibrant and in your face and eye-catching? I think our brand probably lives between the middle towards vibrant bold. We're warm, inviting, vibrant, bold is definitely where we like to live with our brand photography. It's where we like to live with our copy. It's where we like to live with our video style. Like even if you're seeing where I'm sitting right now or what I'm wearing, like definitely vibrant, bold, right? We're not afraid of color around here. So consider where that works within your brand values. Your brand adjectives will help you create content in a consistent style to your message. You don't want to be sitting in like a super sterile, cold environment talking about something warm and inviting. You don't want to be in the super warm, crazy, chaotic environment when you need to talk about something really serious, right? So we want to match the surroundings and match the visuals to the perception of the brand or to the actual values that you're trying to communicate. And there's a few ways you can do this for consistency. So first and foremost, wearing your brand colors or wearing merch with your branding on it is a very obvious way in your photography and your videography to visually communicate your company. But not to be overlooked, standardizing your lighting and framing just as important. So if you record a web show or you're making TikToks or you are even just shooting brand photos, having something that helps you standardize the visual style is going to help create brand consistency. And that's what we're talking about here, right? Like when you show up consistently, people know how to interact with you better. So we want to pay attention to textures. We want to pay attention to props or settings. That's why you'll find me recording the podcast here in the studio with the lights, with the bright artwork behind me. It just helps to elevate the experience of viewing the content when there are those variables that stay consistent. Having consistent editing and filters is also important here. Making sure you're communicating these to your brand photographer as photo video guidelines can be really huge. So what we want to do is make sure that wherever you fit in this spectrum, from light and airy, natural and balanced, warm and inviting, vibrant, bold, dark, moody, is also coming across in the editing style. Now, when you source a photographer to work with, it's also important that they edit or shoot in the style that matches your brand. And I have this a lot back and forth with the clients that we work with. So as a creative director, when I'm coming on to help set the tone for the photography for a shoot for one of our clients, I am making sure and I'm showing not only visual examples, but written examples of what I'm looking for, which is this edit is supposed to be light and airy, or this edit is supposed to be really warm and textured and saturated, or this edit is going to be really high contrast, dark, moody. I want to make sure that we're communicating that to the photo video team so that they have a clear idea of how that's all going to come together and how that is going to play into or play up the branding that our team has been working on. So brand guidelines from our team side, we can package them in a few different ways. One of the ways that we like to do it is include it in the brand guidelines. So there's a dedicated page that says these are the types of scenes and this is the type of style that we look for, whether we want it to have a vintage, like yellow 70s kind of feel, or it needs to be really crisp and clean and scientific, or does it need to be more illustrative or more abstract to communicate concepts that are not easy to capture on photo or video, right? You can think about different ways to pull the brand values, which go back to episode part 1 of this chunk, the brand values coming through in your visuals and in your content style. You can also think about content style as being the type of content that you put forward, right? Is it voiceover? Is it talking face to camera? Is it montage? Is it collage? Like there's different ways to pull those visuals forward. But what we're looking for on this is consistency and communicating this to your brand photographer as photo video guides or a big brain dump document. If you're unfamiliar, Canva actually has a type of file called whiteboard, which is like an infinite pinboard where you can throw all kinds of stuff. You can copy paste links, you can drop in images, you can do text, you can do word bubbles, blah, blah, blah. Would highly recommend using that with your creative teams so that you can just create almost like a big messy desk, a big mood board of everything that you're considering and lay it all out and organize it by type. So, for example, we did the shoot with Falk Roof and Gallagher, the real estate group, and we're always sending them like, okay, we want it to look like this, but sound like this, and also kind of look like this. And we'll put a whole mood together of examples of photos, videos, editing, everything, all in kind of one big deal so that people can see it all at a like 30,000 foot view, right? Then we can really zoom in and go specific, like, okay, this scene is going to look like this, yada, yada, yada. Same for your photography. So when we were working, for example, with Hotel Lobby Candle on a photo shoot, we made sure to focus on textures, lighting, props, settings that were going to fit whatever that specific candle scent was. And a lot of times with them, the hardest part was figuring out how to communicate the way that something smells when you can't smell it until you buy it. So the poolside candle, although pretty obvious, right? It's pool. We wanted to make sure that the pool felt very pool anywhere because it's part of the core collection. It wasn't specifically tied to a place. So what's the experience of pool? What are the textures of pool? So we sourced like tile and towels, terry cloth, linen and wicker and rattan to give you kind of the pool feeling, and made sure that was the differentiator, whereas the consistency was in the lighting and the framing and the composition. That is always going to stay the same from collection to collection to collection, the variable being the color and the setting, right? So the visuals and having visual consistency, knowing which dials, right, on your switchboard you're going to crank up or turn down depending on a specific shoot, are going to be really important in helping create your consistent visual content style, which elevates your branding, which was part 2 of this recording. Similarly, and this is where I think I lost some people when I presented this the first time, your content sound. What does your brand sound like? And again, we have kind of a spectrum. We have all the way from delicate and whimsical to earthy and ambient to rhythmic and vibrant, bold and powerful, all the way to dramatic and mysterious. So a delicate, whimsical brand sound would be like unserious, right? And this is that really kind of like twinkly, glittery sound. You can kind of think about it like in your head, like very Tinkerbell flying over the Disney castle, right? Delicate and whimsical would be the adjectives I would use to describe that. And the reason that we're focusing in on sound is because I think that as brands start to evolve, it's going to be harder and harder to create your own signature thumbprint of your brand existence in the digital space without considering sound. We spent so much time talking about visuals. We spent so much time talking about your logo and your colors and the fonts and the way that it looks. But sound, I think, elevates your experience even more. It calls forward another one of your senses. And I think that the sound consistency of a brand is just as important as all of the visual consistency, especially as we come into video. So your voice is the first and most obvious example of the way that your brand sounds. How you talk, the cadence of your sentences, the sing-songy nature, the directness or the indirectness, the tone of your voice can also do a lot for carrying your brand sound. But you can also supplement it with these other things. Like I said, this delicate, whimsical being like the twinkly sounds, or earthy, ambient being more wind rustling, or ocean, or water, or trees blowing in the wind, right? That gives us a sense of space that's really nice to attached to a brand. So if that fits within your brand values, having more of those earthy, natural, ambient kind of background noisy sounds, consider how you weave that in with some of your content, right? Can you create reels or TikToks or podcasts or audio experiences or lessons, right? Like downloadable courses and webinars that incorporate sound in that way, just to, again, pique the senses, carry the brand values, and move that whole thing forward. Once we get into like rhythmic and vibrant and bold and powerful, this is, I feel like, where we get more into like the musicality of it. So when you're thinking of music for your brand to use on Reels or on TikTok, or to have as like a brand playlist, maybe that's an offering, right? Like your restaurant. So you can think about this with like restaurant design and how restaurant experiences or hotel experiences are heightened, or how distracting it is when you're in a restaurant and the music is not the same vibe as the food that you're eating. And it can be kind of jarring. It can be kind of like, oh my God, what? Like, I haven't heard this song in forever. Or like, this music is way too intense for what we're doing here. Like, imagine if you went to a spa and they played Screamo, right? Wouldn't really work for you. So figuring out how to match the sound and the quality of sound to your brand is another way to elevate the experience for your audience, but also add another layer, another sense to the experience of working with your company. So you're like waiting music, maybe it's your voicemail, maybe it's your sign on or sign off at the beginning or end of a video. The more rhythmic, vibrant, bold, powerful kind of music is gonna carry those same values with them. All the way to the very far end of the spectrum, which is like dramatic and mysterious, right? This is like the dun dun, or the like leave them on the edge of their seat kind of feeling, which is harder to incorporate for some brands. But I think that came through with Fit Boss Blueprint. His inspiration was Batman, X anime, X James Bond in a Batcave in luxury Batcave spa in San Diego. Like, that has its whole soundscape to it. So when we're thinking of building content for a brand like that, you want to also make sure that the music isn't this like doody doody doo la di da like Tinkerbell sparkly noise. It's not going to fit. We want something that's a little bit more like bass heavy and rooted and strong and a little bit more mysterious to pull forward those same values. When you think about your content style and sound, thinking about your voiceover tone and cadence, like we talked about, the way that you speak, the way that you communicate your sentences. Are you going to do like an Obama speech pattern where you say one thing and you let it sit for a long time? Obviously, I struggle with that. I am a fast talker. I am ADD adjacent and love to say a lot of things really fast because it's exciting to me. And I feel that my mouth only works at about a third of the speed of my brain. So that's not that kind of cadence, although I respect it and I like love listening to it, is hard for me to communicate. So it'd be disingenuous for me to try to imitate that type of messaging. But when it comes to your brand, there are times when that kind of slower, more calm, more measured cadence makes more sense. So when I'm trying to prove a point, I'm going to slow down my speech pattern. I'm going to get more quiet. I might get more choosy with my words, and that's intentional, right? So you can already contrast what that was just now to what I just said and see how those two different voice changes change how you're perceiving the message that I'm saying, the words that I'm saying. Your intro, outro, and sound effects are another chance to really pull forward those brand content sounds. So your video content in general, or even like into a Zoom call, a client call, any kind of like waiting room type music, like figuring out what those things are, theme songs, brand playlists are really important to kind of communicate those brand values. Now, this was the one that threw everybody for a loop. Considering a sonic logo. So a sonic logo is the sound that you associate with usually with the logo coming on. Classic one of this is like Netflix, right? Do-do, Netflix. Or do-do-do, NBC. Those would be sonic logos, like you usually would know them in like radio or television. I think and predict that more brands will be investing in these kinds of sonic logos to go along with the actual brands that they're creating. And I think it's because as we all create more podcasts, web shows, everything like that, the sonic logo is going to be your own signature. It's going to be your own sign off. It's going to be the XOXO Gossip Girl. It's going to be your tagline and your jingle. And I think it's a great way to stay cemented in the brains of your audience. Like, we can still remember commercials from our childhood, right? Like 800-588-2333. 300 Empire. Like we can still remember these things because they have that like lyrical, sonic sticking power. And I think as brands evolve, we're going to see even more brands invest in whatever that is. The most obvious version for me is like the theme song of this podcast, for example. Very much inspired by White Lotus, very much that like high pitched kind of sticky, get stuck in your head, high energy, really colorful kind of song. Very intentional, right? Very intentional. The last bit that I have to share here about your content style and actually crafting your brand message, your unique aesthetic and tone, is in the message itself. So your message, again, along the spectrum here, we have lighthearted and fun, relatable and approachable, uplifting, motivated, energetic and bold, or serious and intense. And that's kind of the sliding scale. And you may find yourself on different ends of the spectrum, depending on what it is that you're promoting or what you have to share. But what we're going to try to do with your brand is figure out where can we live most comfortably? Where is that area where we know that we can keep coming back to, just like we can keep coming back to a photography style or a sound, where the message is going to feel consistent because it's going to elevate the rest of the brand, right? And we either want to match what we have in the branding or create a little bit of contrast here. So your message, if your colors are bright and colorful and fun, and your sound is bright and colorful and fun, then you probably are going to end up with something bright and colorful and fun as far as message. So how you say, how you use your words, whether you use internet slang or not, whether you have inside jokes with your audience or not, or whether you're just like straight and to the point, that will probably be reflected in the branding. And it's a great way to create some symmetry and some parallel lines between what it is you're saying and how you're saying it. So this is the what part, right? The sound is how you say it. The visuals are what it looks like. And this is the actual message. The content is the what part of it. So considering where you're falling within the spectrum to actually define your message is going to be hugely important for really cementing your brand and cementing that opportunity to either attract the right clients or repel the wrong clients. So sticking into that, finding ways that it still feels authentic to you is huge. You'll notice that like authentic or authenticity isn't a word on the spectrum. I would hope that all your branding comes across as authentic because you're doing things from an authentic place. But you can figure out, okay, on this effort, we're going to lean a little bit more energetic and bold versus this effort, we're going to try to be a little bit more approachable or a little more lighthearted and fun and like not be so in everybody's face, right? So you can kind of play along this spectrum, just like we talk about like your brand being a switchboard and you're cranking up different dials at different times, or if you're cooking with different ingredients, like you lean, some of your dishes are spicy and some are less spicy, right? Like this is more of adding that spice in, like how big do we want to be with this message? And finding where within this spectrum that fits. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, this will make sense because you'll be able to see the actual visuals of the spectrums as I'm describing them. The other way to think about your defining your message is making sure that you're talking to the right audience, that you're communicating your brand values, telling stories, catering to emotional alignment, and staying true to your core brand. So staying true to your core brand, again, that's the authenticity note. I would hope so, because if you're not authentic to your brand, what are we doing here? But talking to the right audience and telling stories that communicate your values are a great way to really pull everything that we just said, from visuals to sound to message, and wrap it up in a nice bow. Catering to their emotional alignment also could be a nice way to go back through these spectrums and figure out where your brand fits, right? So at the point where someone is ready to work with you, where are they mentally, emotionally? Are they at a rock bottom? Are they optimistic? Are they considering this an investment in change of their lifestyle or their company or their whatever? Figuring out where they might fit within these will also help you figure out how to lean into being attractive and aspirational to them when they need you. And I think that's what good brands do really well, right? Is that they have what we kind of call like the target dollar section ideas. Like, oh, I didn't know I needed this, but as soon as I saw it, I knew it was for me. That's the kind of feeling that we're trying to inspire with branding. So that will pretty much cover everything from the craft your unique aesthetic and tone section. This is part 3 of a multi-part solo episode series sharing about building your bragworthy brand empire, which means not only just your brand, but building something that people can buy into, that you can hire a team, that you build the lifestyle that you want. This was a lot of fun to record, but we do have 1, maybe 2 chunks left. So we will hear you next time. See you next time on the Kiss My Aesthetic podcast. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you soon. Bye.